Good morning, everybody. It's me, Mitch, and today I'm going to take you along while I cook my breakfast, and I'm going to talk about the single most important subject that I talk about over and over again and can't be talked about enough, and that is, how do you cure your carbohydrate addiction? In my opinion, carbohydrate addiction is the reason all of us have found it necessary to change our lifestyle, or dare I use the phrase, go on a diet to fix the things that we've done to ourselves as a victim. And we're all victims of the despicable things that the food and drug companies do to us, that the medical communities have bought into, that have made us, dare I say, grist for the mill. Grist for the mill. If you know what that expression means. We have become the subjects to trade our health, our well-being, our very lifespan and suffering for profits, greed, and power. That's just a truth. In spite of the advice that we get, in spite of the medical community telling us how we need to take drug after drug after drug to manage the fact that we're poisoning ourselves, eating the food that they keep telling us is so good for us and so healthy. The fact that we're seeing record levels of chronic diseases, that most of us are actually medicating already and taking drugs that we have to take for life. And yet, in spite of all the treatment, all the money, the prevalence of these conditions keeps going up and up and up. How do you explain that? How do you explain that? Well, the only way you can explain it is to say there's something wrong. There's something not working on all fronts. Number one, all of this has happened over the last 50 years. We know that the worst things that we could be eating are sugars, seed oils, and grains. I think those are the major sources of the poisoning that we're doing to ourselves. But there are so many other things. Chemicals used in food additives, in ultra-processed food. Insecticides, pesticides, glyphosates, and a host of other chemicals sprayed on the agriculture and the plants that we eat, and are proffered on us as healthy fruits and vegetables. They even managed to get some of this stuff into the meat, so we need to be careful. But they do demonize probably the only foods on the planet where they can't addict us. And they cannot addict us to meat, and they cannot addict us to fat. It can't happen. We can only be addicted to carbohydrates when it comes to food. And there are evolutionary and biological reasons. And simply put, those reasons are the fact that the carbohydrates were survival food for when the meat and fat weren't there. And when survival is at stake, the rules change. Never meant to become the default way of living, to be powered by survival food. We get addicted to survival food because it was how we survived. Instead of satisfying our appetite, survival food stimulates our appetite. It makes psychological changes, chemical changes in the way our subconscious works. It makes us gorge, fight each other for the food because survival is at stake. Well, survival isn't at stake anymore. There's plenty of food, or stuff they call food, and it's everywhere, every day, 24/7. And the big industries have learned the science of addiction, and they've learned how to manipulate the ingredients in these foods to make it as addictive as possible. They're drug pushers. They're like the tobacco companies, spiking cigarettes with additional chemicals and nicotine to make them more addictive. When you addict somebody to your product, you guarantee your success. When it gets to the point where people don't think they can live without your product, you've got it made. Your only job is to keep figuring out ways to make it more delicious, more satisfying, and more addictive. I think that's why we have 15 different flavors of Cheerios. And then when you can advertise it as healthy, people think they're doing the right thing when they're killing themselves. So we are a nation, at least 80% of us, I believe, are hooked on carbs and hooked hard. And that's evidence that I talk about it a lot, evidenced by just the sheer amount of this crap that's being sold and people are buying. Why would people buy something if they weren't attracted to it, if it didn't bring them pleasure? So here we sit, a bunch of addicts, getting fatter, getting sicker, developing all of these things that aren't even diseases, they're poisonings, chronic conditions like diabetes, heart disease, dementia and Alzheimer's, mental illness, obesity. The food companies have done their job. They have made it okay to sell this stuff to our children. They've made it okay to wean our children on this poison. They've made it okay to put this stuff in the baby formula that we feed our children. They have our children addicted. In most cases, a lifetime addiction, an addiction almost impossible to reverse. They have our children stone addicts before they're 1 or 2 years old. Anybody that has a young toddler that tries to get them to stop eating sugar always will cave to the tantrums. Because these young children may not know much, but they do know how to get their way. And they don't hesitate to exercise it. So we are addicts. The first step in curing your addiction, number one, is to recognize, admit to yourself, understand that you're in the shape you're in, that you're here looking for a way to lose weight, to get healthy. I don't care if you're 20 years old or 80 years old. It's the same cause. I don't expect many 2- and 3-year-olds to be listening to me. It's up to their parents to listen to me. And it's not easy. It's not easy to deny your child a treat when that has been what you've been using to get him to behave all along. They're not going to take it well. Maybe it's too late for most of these kids today. But for anybody just starting out, for God's sakes, do not even let them understand the concept of a sweet treat. You're sunk after that. You are sunk after that. Trust me. I have kids and grandkids. They're all sunk. Very few of us have the wherewithal and the clarity of mind anymore to take the time to learn that there's no quick fix to this. There's no weight loss drug that will permanently fix this problem. There's no diet that includes carbohydrates that will fix this problem for the 80% of us that are carb addicts. If you're not a carb addict, you're very lucky. Very, very lucky. You still need to be health conscious, but at least you're not driven by those cravings to keep eating the poisonous food that most of us are eating. Accept the fact that you're a carb addict. Accept it. Just like an alcoholic can't cure or can't get rid of his alcoholism or hers until they admit they're an alcoholic. Make a conscious decision to completely abstain from that addictive substance and start going to support groups and meetings. Otherwise, they'll fail too. Same thing is true for carbohydrate addiction, especially because in reality, carbohydrate addiction is the oldest and strongest addiction a human animal can ever experience. And we're all hooked. We're all hooked. 75 years of my life, I was ruled by these addictions. Excuse me, while I beat my eggs. Thank you. So, all our life, we've been ruled by these addictions. I finally learned enough to recognize that if I didn't get rid of these addictions, these cravings, I'm helpless. I'm helpless, and we are helpless. We like to think we're in control. We like to think that we have willpower. We have to accept the fact that we're not in control. Our animal mind is in control. It knows how to provoke the actions that get it what it wants, and it thinks it's starving to death, and it needs sugar or it's going to die, and you have no conscious control. Your conscious mind, controlled by your subconscious, is now feeding you lame excuses. You're making promises to yourself. Well, I just need this gallon of ice cream one more time, just one more time. And if this doesn't sound familiar to you, maybe you don't have a problem, but I don't think there's one among us who hasn't been to that place I'm talking about right now, where you start negotiating with yourself. Well, I'll just do it this one last time, you know, just one more. I need it. I really need it now. I'm all nervous. I'm upset. I'm stressed out. I need that ice cream. I need the cookies and donuts. I need a huge plate of pasta. I need bread. I need carbs. Most of us aren't jonesing for vegetables, believe me. But we are jonesing for carbs. And we do it. And we promise this is the last time. I promise I'm going to get serious about this tomorrow, on Monday, next month, next year, whenever, next lifetime. Admit you're an addict. Once you've resigned yourself to the fact that you're an addict, then you have to resign yourself to the fact that in order to cure any addiction, you must abstain. That makes carnivore, in my opinion, for 80% of us, the only way to cure your addiction. You can't cure your addiction by continuing to eat carbs and figure out a way to get the maximum sweetness and the maximum soul-satisfying goodness by trying to make low-carb versions of the crap that got you into this mess in the first place. It doesn't work. How do I know? I tried it for years and years. I could keep it up for a short period of time. The addictions always won. I have been pretty much carb addiction free, food freedom for 2 years now. How did I do it? I did it by completely abstaining from carbs and focusing on a diet of only meat and fat with the correct fat to protein ratio. I played on the fact that when I stuffed myself full of protein and fat to the point where I couldn't eat anymore, my cravings didn't rear their ugly head. I finally figured out that until these cravings subsided, and it's going to take the better part of a month at a minimum, I needed to make sure I'd never allowed myself to get hungry. And my advice is, whenever you even start thinking about food, any food, and it's going to be carbs, stuff your face full of meat. Eat until you eat like you've never eaten in your life. Eat more food than you ever thought you'd ever be able to hold. Do whatever it takes to keep yourself from getting hungry. Carry food with you everywhere. Pre-cook hamburger patties, strips of bacon. Make sure you're never far from food. Once those cravings take hold, and you don't have something that isn't carbs to eat, you're going to eat carbs and you are back to square one again. If you have never been there, raise your hand. I don't see a lot of hands out there. This is just a fact. It works. I know it works. You're afraid. You're afraid to do this because you're so worried about your weight. Well, I can't eat all that food. I'll gain weight, and I'm doing this to lose weight. That's the second thing. You're not doing this to lose weight. You're doing this to cure your carb addiction. The only thing that you can do to start yourself on a path to be free of that addiction for the rest of your life. It worked for me. It's worked for so many people that have been listening to me. It's not a miracle. It's chemistry and physiology and evolutionary biology. It's real, not magic or mystical. Never let yourself get hungry. Always eat when you're hungry. And when you start eating, eat till satiety, till you can't eat anymore. I don't care if you have to eat 8,000 calories a day during that first month. Do it. Maybe you won't lose a lot of weight. You're not going to gain weight either, believe it or not. But you are going to convert your physiology to prioritize running on fat. And when you are running on fat and your body learns that it forgot, but it's supposed to be running on fat as a prime energy source. Once it learns that, and it takes 3 weeks, 4 weeks for your brain to recognize that you're not starving to death because of a lack of sugar. There will be no need for your subconscious anymore, for any survival reason, to keep feeding you these cravings. It feeds you these cravings because even though you may have 1,000,000 calories of fat stored on your body, because of your insulin levels and your conditions, you cannot get to them. Your body is panicking because it thinks you're running out of sugar. It compels you to eat sugar. It's as simple as that. By simply eating more non-sugar food, non-carb food, which only leaves protein and fat, and never letting yourself get hungry. You don't need to do this for any more than a month. And stay off the scale because it doesn't matter. And those are my rules. That's how you cure carb addiction. It's that simple. And it may sound simple, but I can't think of any other way, not that I've discovered, to do it. I have many videos on this channel, many videos. In the end screen of this video, I'll put a link to one of them about how to start carnivore. And you start it this way with a main goal of curing that addiction. That's the only thing that will help you cure the addiction. Sounds severe, but it works. I'm living proof of that. I've never been healthier in my life at 77.5 years old. I hope that this made some sense to you, and we're certainly going to be talking about it more and more. But it is the most important thing that I can impart to anybody out there, struggling people who've been trying to succeed on carnivore, especially keto people who just keep falling off the wagon, and new people who finally awakened to the fact that they're not healthy and going downhill fast and need to do something. This is the something you can do, maybe the only something you can do. I hope it makes sense to you and you'll give it some validity before you dismiss it out of hand as some wacko lunatic talking about stuffing your face full of meat. And with that, my friends, I'm going to eat my first meal of the day, which is a healthy portion of bacon and eggs, some of the healthiest food on the planet Earth, regardless of what they say. And for you, consider what I've said. Take the rest of the day off and eat meat.